We're going to talk about today, the topic of today is first conversations with customers. So one of the changes we're making to the Opus system, we've actually got the work is beginning with our development team, is on improving two things. One, our lead management, or our new tutor request management, right? So lead management, we're talking about both new customers that are coming to us looking for help, but also existing customers calling looking for help for a different subject. So we've got a whole new lead management process that kind of funnels that through from the stages of the person contacting us to creating a work order, doing a tutor match, confirming the first session is scheduled, and then a 3-week follow-up for those 5 steps. And the importance of tracking those through the system will allow us to figure out, we're probably never going to be 100%. Every person that calls us is 100% through to ongoing tutoring. But that's where we want to shoot for. And so being able to track this, we'll be able to see where there's dips, where there's fall-offs, where we can make improvements. So those are the key performance indicators that we'll be tracking in the system. So I want to bring up, I'm going to share my screen really quickly here, and we're going to take a look at one file. Where is it? Whoa. Actually, before I share my screen, let me actually go to the right screen. So okay, so are you now looking at a screen that's got a graph on it? Yeah. Okay. All right. So this screen, we're going to be talking about several things in director development meetings. One is about this initial conversation and with customers, but then the other is going to be the lifetime value of the customer. So we're obviously working on both of those things, being able to bring in the new customer, secure that business, but then also really develop a solid relationship so we extend the lifetime value of that customer. We're being of greater service to that family. So this is looking at a set of data from my education center. This is what Vincent manages. I think we looked at this before in the past, but we're just going to do a quick review. So right now we have an average 31 hours of instruction per student. So you can see this distribution here. We have 366 students that had from 21 to 30 hours. And then you can see over here, this extended 229 from 51 to 100, and then it starts to tail off. But obviously these are really good students that are, working with multiple hundred numbers of hours. And then what we also do is we extend this out to figure out what the lifetime value of that customer is. So on average, it's $2,000. And then after instructor costs, $1,235. So what this means is that these customers here, this 136 that had one session and then we're done, right, is obviously costing us. We need to figure out how to make improvements around these early numbers. What this chart doesn't show, though, is how many people called in for services and never even got to one. So that's what we're going to be tracking in the future. This conversation today is about that first conversation. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen now. And so this conversation is about when we have that first phone call, that first contact with a customer, what are the things that are, what are our objectives? What are we trying to accomplish? What does success look like? And when there's failure to move that customer, that prospect into tutoring, where are the drop-offs and maybe what we can do to make some improvements. So let's start off the conversation. So you guys, all of us here have a lot of experience. And just to kind of bring you up to speed with Himanshu's experience, Himanshu has an engineering background as well as an MBA, I believe. He also is actively tutoring students in the Iowa area, really loves that tutoring experience. And so he's kind of new to that process. Himanshu, do you want to say anything else, a little short introduction?
I will say I've been obviously tutoring my kids also for a long time, for 10 years, and they have been excelling. They've been doing very well. But apart from that, for the last 3 years, I've been doing a part of a different company altogether, tutoring through them. and help students score ACTS scores by 4 points. Also in like math or science, chemistry, those kind of subjects I have been tutoring, and looking forward to joining your team. A part of a school is easy franchise operation, and just go from there.
Awesome.
Great.
Thank you.
I just had a quick question on the graph that he showed.
Yeah.
Like when the students drop off after 1 or 2 classes, do you have any like exit sort of interview that, hey, what happened? Why you're not meeting after just one session? What happened?
Yeah, so it's a really good question. So I think that Vincent will be able to speak to that in another conversation. We can have a follow-up on that.
Okay.
That's actually a good topic for another director development meeting is that 2 things. How do we know that people are dropping off? And then how do we re-engage? So that's one of the things as far as the coaching that's provided. That's one of Vincent's focuses, but I'm sure that we'll all have things to add to that conversation as well. The system, our Opus data management system, is also, we're making improvements to it as well to be able to have on our dashboard indicators when somebody's dropping off, because somebody just not doing tutoring for a week, missing a week, or somebody missing a couple weeks because they're out of town looks different, of course, than somebody that's dropping off. And we need to be able to understand, okay, where these fall offs, and then as they extend, how do we reach back out with that customer and figure out what's going on. The other thing too is, of course, is engaging with the instructor so that from the instructor, if there's somebody's gone for a couple weeks, the instructor knows why that student's not coming in, so that we can follow up if it's a known reason versus they've fallen off. Okay, but really good question though. Re-engagement and keeping them engaged over time. So let's talk right now, let's transition and talk about goals. And this is just anybody can jump in. So let's start off with you, Craig. What are your goals in the first conversation that you have with a customer?
Well, you never get a second chance to make a first impression. So, and be cordial, be friendly, information gathering, I would say. The more information you get, the better match you're going to make, the happier, client you're going to have.
Okay.
So, get as much as you can. And in that initial meeting, lay out your policies and, how you hire teachers, what are the criteria is for hiring teachers. I find people like that, or they're going to ask it anyways. So
yeah,
start with those principles, I would say.
Okay. So Susan, what do you think what would you say your goals of the first, what's your goal of the first call?
Well, Craig nailed it.
Thanks, Susan.
Very good, Craig. You hit every point, I think. You definitely have to listen. You're caring, get all the information, and then answer their questions and make sure they understand what is required. So I'm now doing the new system, so I'm letting them know it's actually the same as before. It's pay as you go. It's just a different payment method. So it's much easier than I thought, by the way.
Okay.
Yay.
Yeah, so that's it.
Okay. All right, yeah. So got some things in there. Okay, so Vincent, well, actually, let's go talk to Himanshu. Himanshu, what do you think, what would be your goals in a first conversation with clients?
Just to understand what their needs are, what they're looking for, and how we at the School is Easy can fulfill that, and what the expectation is. Okay, I want this person to go from C to B or C to A, or a ACTS score of whatever, 24 to 28. What we will do, I mean, you need to lay out, hey, this is our plan and this is how we will do. You need to convince the client that by doing this way, your student will able to move that. And then obviously you want to lay out the policy, how this will work and who the teachers are, what kind of qualification that have, and you have to convince them in a way that, hey, this we will able to match with the right tutor, and your student will be able to help improve their scores.
Okay, excellent. All right, so Vincent, we're gonna, same question.
So I agree with a lot of the things that you guys said. But my mind kind of went in kind of a different direction. So what I kind of thought about is, what is the experience that I want the client to have? And
hey, go ahead, Vincent.
Yeah.
Really important that we be able to capture what you're saying. We're getting feedback on you.
Okay.
Now we can't hear you.
Hello.
You know what?
I don't know why we're getting feedback. Is it,
Yes.
am I coming on someone's speakers or something?
Are you guys hearing feedback too?
I'm hearing feedback.
Yes.
So let's do an experiment. Craig, can you mute yourself?
Hello.
Okay, now talk.
Hello.
It was Craig.
My speakers were too loud on Craig's.
Yeah. Okay,
Anyway,
so
so just
yes,
to get back into it. So my objective is to make sure that we're the last phone call the client makes. So the client doesn't get off the phone with me and say, okay, I need to look at some other options. And all the things that you guys kind of said tie into that, you know. But my experience is the way that I get off that phone call with the client not making another phone call is with them feeling like, okay, you know, Vince has got this covered. We've got a solution.
yeah. Okay, good. I like that answer. I like all the answers, and I think that it's important. I think of it a little bit like the way that Vincent does as well. And in all fairness, by the way, Vincent and I are also doing vlogs where we just have conversations about these topics as well. So we've already kind of jumped into this conversation a little bit, and so we've thought through some of it as well. So when I think about a goal, I think about what is the objective that I'm trying to accomplish. And then I think about, well, what are the things that are going to help me reach that goal, right? And so we have the kind of incremental things. So explaining for me, explaining the policies is not a goal. That is a kind of step along the process to the goal. My ultimate goal is I need to get off that by the end of that phone call, I want that parent to trust that they have found the right person. I want them to know that they've come to the right place. I want them to feel calm, relaxed, and I want us at the end of that call with a clear direction forward. What is that next direction forward that they're confident that they're on the right path to getting the help that they need? That might be if we didn't have enough time in the first call to a longer intake conversation. It might be might be doing the next step with the tutor match. It might be whatever that is, but we have something very clear and tangible at the end of that meeting, and the customer, I've made a really good connection and they feel really confident that they found the right person. Okay. All right, so let's talk about now, let's get into the, what does it look like as far as the steps through that process? Because I think that most of these conversations, I think we'd all would agree, they follow a fairly set routine. And even when there's deviations, those deviations from those kind of set routines, even those kind of have a set pattern as well. So when somebody first calls in, what's the first kind of thing? Let's start with you again, Craig. What's the first thing that happens? Like, what's the first thing that you're doing? What are you working on?
Well, I guess initially, start with a friendly conversation and work your way into digging for information, I guess. I usually tell them, like, they want to know how, I don't know, a generic question, let's say, how do you guys work, or how are you guys different from other places or whatever? So I usually state like our teacher hiring process in a nutshell, that I meet with them personally, and I kind of use my own better judgment lots of times in hiring. So they don't have to worry about that.
Okay.
And then kind of get into the meat and potatoes, I guess I would say, as far as costs and what they're looking for, and do they want a male or a female tutor, like try to get the specifics.
Okay.
We'll go from
All
there.
right. Susan, anything else to add there?
Yeah, asking them all the questions I need to make a match. One of the most difficult things is getting the schedule, because that's what's going to make the match for us. And they often don't know their schedule on the phone. So that's where they get off the phone and say, I'll get back to you. I have to talk to my kid. And you don't want that to happen. So that's a tough one. Then we'll say, oh no, it's okay. I'll still send it out to my teachers and I'll find out what their schedules are. So,
okay.
Yeah.
All right. Vincent, what's the first, when you're, having a conversation with your, when somebody first calls in? What's that process look like for you?
So sometimes, like Craig, you were saying, the parents will call in like with a really, really specific question about like price or administration or scheduling or those kinds of things. And of course, when you're asked a direct question, you need to answer that question. But I always transition into the parent talking about what they're observing with their student. Like in a sense, and this is kind of what you alluded to earlier, Craig, is just getting the parent to tell the story of their kid. What is the parent observing? What is the student from the parent's perspective observing? What is what's the reason that they called in the first place? So for example, this is an example I brought up to Jared yesterday, is sometimes a parent will call and the first thing they say is, what's the price? And you're like, that's not really where you want to start the conversation, obviously. So we always transition that into, well, there's a range of prices depending on the instructor and the needs of the student. So first, and I can kind of give you an idea about what that is, but tell me about what's going on with your student. And it's kind of a natural segue into getting the parent talking, so that as you said, Craig, you can have a really great conversation with the parent and get the information that you need. But really, a lot of times I feel like sometimes I feel like it's almost like a counseling session for the parent. Like they're just overly stressed and they need to just unload and kind of download on somebody. And so my first objective is asking a question like, tell me about what prompted you to call us, or tell me about what what problems you're observing, or what your kid's been saying about the class, or whatever. Just really open-ended questions to get the parent talking.
Yeah. So Susan and Craig, do you, when you have those first conversations, is that a natural segue for you, Craig, to when you're talking in the beginning, is to reflect back and ask about, so what's your concerns or what the issues are? And then they start getting into the meat and potatoes of what their challenges are?
Sometimes you don't even have to prompt them. They it's like
Barely.
being a bartender. They just, like Vincent said, they just tell you, like you're like a psychiatrist. They're telling you, everything about the kid and their problems, and he started getting a girlfriend, and he's playing hockey, and yada yada yada.
Yeah.
I see that quite a bit. But on the other hand, then you get people that are just calling black and white. What are your rates?
Yeah.
Maybe I need help with that. They're just strictly business. They don't want to, not a meet and greet or anything. They just want facts, numbers, tutor details, etc.
So, Susan, when somebody's calling in and they've got that kind of, I think that's, let me put this out there, that obviously it depends upon where the person's coming from. I bet that when somebody comes as a word of mouth referral, I bet almost 100% of the time they're engaging in a conversation with you. They're willing to open up and talk. Would you guys agree? If it's a word of mouth referral, they've come from somebody else has recommended, they've said, hey, this person told me to call you guys. That just opens that door up. So part of growing your business is, of course, is doing a great job with your current customers, because those people that refer people, those are gold mines, because it's not just a lead that comes in, it's not just a prospect. You already have like a kind of a relationship with them. That's what I have felt many times, is like, hey, I'm a friend of John Roseman's. Well, I've been working with John Roseman's kids. We've been working with John Roseman's kids for 3 years, right? And so, oh yeah, John, and I know something about John, right? In fact, if I find a prospect's coming in and I find out who they were referred by, I'll look up that family's information, make sure I'm really familiar before I get on the phone. So, oh yeah, so it's very cordial, and make those connections. So that part of it is comes more natural, and for me, I think a big part of this conversation is we want them talking, because as they start to talk about this issue, it is like a counseling session. They've got a lot of stress and anxiety, and now they have a chance to talk about this frustration and this challenge. Okay, so the next part, I guess, of building rapport. What do we do with that information? Okay, they've given us a bunch of information. So what's the next step? What's the next step for you, Susan? So they've given you a bunch of information. What do you do? What comes after they've told you this information?
Well, it's case by case. if we have something in common. I have kids in grade 11 and grade 12 and one that's just started university last year. So I can always reflect on, oh, my daughter had the same problem and here's what we did. So I'm using that because I can deal, have something in common. It depends on how the conversation goes, but you just try to build a rapport in whatever way it happens, if you have something in common.
Right.
I want to comment about those people that call about price. I have the feeling that competitors call us. They just want to know the price and get off the phone. So I wouldn't feel too bad about some of those phone calls.
Well, yeah, and I think that you could probably weed those people out. The process of, like what Vincent was saying, is that when they call in and they say, okay, we'd like to know what your prices are. And then, so we have a range of prices, from, and if they need to, we can say specifically from, let's call it our low range at our education center. It is $45 to a high of 90 or more. But it really just depends upon what the needs of the students are, what the challenges are and what needs to happen. So tell me a little bit more about what your, child is. And if they're just not interested, they're just, kicking the tires, then that's fine. We get off. But obviously, turning that back and getting them talking. So
yeah, people want to talk about themselves and they want to talk about their kids.
Yeah. So I think and that's an important part of the salesman process is that it's like some people, if they're not coming from word of mouth referrals, if they came just from the website and they're shopping around, they kind of have an idea that, people are trying to sell me and I'm not trying to be sold, right? So you got to have that kind of way to just kind of easy transition to getting them talking, not us talking, them talking, right? Them talking about what the challenges are. Okay. One of the things that I want to talk about is a concept called mirroring. Have either of you heard of mirroring? Yeah, mirroring. So mirroring comes from, one of the places it comes from is NLP. Anybody, you guys ever heard of neuro-linguistic programming? Nobody. Okay, so neuro-linguistic programming came out of NLP. It came out of the 70s, was really developed in the 80s. What it's really about is how we use language and how the brain, right, processes language in this kind of bidirectional process when we communicate, as a part of our decision making, as a part of forming ideas, judgments, all this kind of stuff. Very, very interesting, very fascinating. One of the things one of the strongest ways to build rapport is mirroring. So when somebody says something to you and they're communicating something that's important to them, paying attention to how they're speaking to you, the language that they're using, the story that's coming out, and then when you take that information in, repeating back to them. And it's crazy. Sometimes the mirroring almost looks verbatim about what they were saying. This is what I heard you say. And you go through that process of making sure that they're heard and the kind of language. And even if you're on a call and somebody's has certain body language, you can get into this stuff a little bit further. You can do things that kind of mimics body language, things like that. And it kind of matches things up and the brain just kind of syncs up and they get the message. This person is trusted. Susan's doing it. That's funny. Is that this person is trustworthy. This person I'm making this connection with. So I think that that's an important part of that process, and listening to the person when they tell their story about what's going on, and then being able to feed back, right? Being able to feed back what you've heard. And then that transitions, for me, immediately into a validation process. The validation process for me is I'm now providing insight. And I think, Susan, you brought in this up as well. You said you talked about some of your experience. Now, you've got some experience with your own children, but of course, the experience that you have with your students and your long history of working with students in the past. So parent says, here's the problem that I'm having. We provide that feedback. And then that naturally transitions into, here are some observations or some insights about these types of problems and these types of issues. And that process is about then validating for the customer that this person that I'm talking to knows what they're talking about. There's the relaxation. And part of that process is actually, so I don't know if you guys noticed this, but Vincent's head started to nod a little bit. right? As I was saying some of those things, because he was recognizing some things that I was talking about that was relatable for his experience.
That rang true for me. Yeah.
It's almost involuntary, right? Right.
Yeah.
This is one of the reasons why, as many times as possible, I'd like to do intakes in person, at the very least online, where I can see the other person, so I can see, am I connecting with them, right? That's an important visual connection. Vincent, why don't you talk a little bit more about that process of, as you feedback, and then how that transitions into that validation, right? The validation of through
Right.
providing insight and some potential direction, and
Right. So one of the things, because I think, Craig, you mentioned sometimes the parents can go on for quite some time, and so I'm listening and taking notes and thinking about what they're saying, and then the feedback part is about helping taking all the kind of disparate information that the parent gave you and kind of synthesizing it into a couple of core ideas for the parent. So in other words, the parent might just see like all these individual problems that the student's having, and you, with your experience, part of your role that you play is kind of getting the big picture of what you're seeing. Um, so being able to feedback the details by kind of saying, I heard you say this, this, and this, and it sounds like the issue might be this. Am I still coming through here?
yeah, it's just a little bit blocky, but I think you're okay.
Okay, yeah. So, so then what I do is then think about, students, my experience, thinking about students that I've worked with in the past that have had these kinds of issues and what some of the causes might be. So I'll give parents a couple ideas about causes what they're seeing, and maybe ask them questions, so for example, I'm after a student's telling me about a parent's telling me about a student who is struggling with chemistry tests. I might ask the parent, okay, well, what does their test preparation process look like, right? Or I might ask them, how are their organization and planning skills, right? Because those are questions that point to reasons that the student might be having the difficulties that they're having. And then oftentimes one of those two questions really connect with the parents, like, oh, right, yeah, really bad organization skills. Or, oh yeah, usually she doesn't even know when her test is, and she finds out from a friend who texts her the day before, things like that, and it like Jared, you were saying, it kind of validates, okay, this guy knows what he's talking about,
Right.
and even if none of those things really strongly connect with the parent, you're still giving them a couple ideas about some potential diagnoses that obviously we'll find out more by talking to the student or having the student meet with an instructor as well.
Yeah. Yeah. So one of the things that we're going to do in these director development meetings is we're going to talk about, we're going to jump into, like, a topic might be on one, challenges with middle school algebra. And we'll have a conversation about what are the common issues in middle school algebra when students struggle, and the parent says this, what are the kind of things, and start to build up our repertoire. When a parent is saying that a student's struggling with writing, high school level essay writing, expository writing, or that they're struggling with their reading, or they're studying for AP history, whatever these issues are, so that we have our kind of grab bag of, yeah, these are the kind of things that students struggle with. And this is kind of sometimes these are the causes, these are the issues that happen, and this is the direction. And also, one of the things that I will do in these conversations is I'll talk about how kind of just reflexive intervention of connecting the tutor just with a student oftentimes doesn't work, right? Like if the student is, and we're not going to dive into that right now, but what I'm trying to do is help the parent understand something that I think is really important to all of our success, is that we're not just an organization that connects tutors with the students, right? That, Craig, ultimately, as we continue to develop your business, you are the centerpiece of this business. You become the expert and the trusted liaison for that family. So when they have an issue and they talk with you, they trust that you have this wealth of knowledge and this idea, and you've got your pulse on what's happening, so that when they bring an issue to you, you understand you're going to be setting a course of direction for addressing this issue, and that you also will be reviewing the session logs, that you'll be engaged with the ongoing process of figuring out, is this working? And if it's not, that you'll be involved in making adjustments with the tutors or whatever that looks like. Vincent, did we lose you? Vincent might come back in a bit. Maybe his computer died. So the, let's see if he texted me.
I'm still here.
Okay, good.
I just turned my video off because I have bad bandwidth right now.
Okay, got it. So I think that is the process that my goal is for all of us is that we have that ability to go through this process to talk and communicate with the parents in a way that builds that rapport with them, but builds trust and confidence in that first conversation, that they have found the right place, that we have insight into what the challenges are that students have, and that we've got a good direction here to address these issues. Okay, Vincent, yep.
Yeah, one thing I wanted to say is, you know, in that initial conversation, like I said, I try not to get bogged down in administrative stuff, although, you know, as you, Craig, mentioned, sometimes the parent is directly asking about those things. But one thing that I typically will mention in that initial conversation is how session reports work for kind of the reasons you were saying, right? The idea the parents are going to be getting it's about what's going on, that you're going to be reviewing those session reports and looking for problems or opportunities for you to be involved and add value. And parents generally really, really appreciate that. And they appreciate the session logs too. I don't know how good that audio came through.
I think I caught a little bit of it.
Yeah, okay. Sorry.
That's right. So I think
logs.
I
explained session logs to parents in that issue.
What I'm hearing is that, yeah, about not getting bogged down into a tremendous amount of the administrative work, but that focus on the session log, that's an important part of it, that the session logs will come after every session, that you will be reviewing them, and the parent will have those session logs as well, right?
Yes.
Establishing that connection that we have a team that's we're going to be working as a team to address this issue. Right. And I also think that this is a good reason why we want to make our administration policies as simple as possible, because we want to talk about the issues that the kids have and the solution, and really building confidence, and then be able to say, well, okay, so for this is our rate, and what happens is you put a credit card on file, the sessions take place, and we bill you as you go. It's a very simple process. It doesn't, and we will send you our one-page, policy, very simple to understand, right? So we can, I think it's good to be able to make that as simple as possible so that we don't get bogged down into that process. And if we need to, you can do a follow-up with them about those issues as well. Okay, Himanshu, we haven't heard from you in a little bit. Anything that you want to add to this kind of conversation right now about that first connection and with the parent, and how do you build rapport and trust with the parent that you know what you're talking about and that they have found the right place? I think he's just on mute.
Hello, sorry, you couldn't hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you
okay.
now.
Okay, so
yeah, we can hear you now.
Okay, so what I was telling that when parents call and say, hey, my student or my son, daughter is just struggling in this subject and trying to figure it out, that how we can help. When you listen to them for 2-3 minutes, you also have to come with some story that you have seen improvement in some other child and try to correlate. Hey, we had the similar student at some place and he or she was having some difficulty in understanding, and how how a tutor helped. I mean, you have to build a story with a story sort of thing, and other things, as someone, Vincent, you mentioned, okay, the policies and all will come later. But if you relate the story with a story, that makes, okay, yeah, it looks like we have seen this kind of thing and we're ready to help you.
Excellent. I like that. I like the emphasis that you made on telling stories, right? Stories are important. Yeah.
It's very important. Then conversation becomes sort of more, okay, I can relate to this person. I can trust this person because this person has seen this kind of thing before. And also, if you know a little bit about the subject they're talking about, you can if you know, then obviously adding those kind of things, how like AP history works, what kind of test and when you're going to take this, how many questions are there. If you have some idea, if you can throw that around, then you can say, hey, this is how we will help. That obviously is a bonus.
Yeah, excellent. Okay, so that's, I think we're going to wrap it up, and then we will, the next sessions, we're going to start jumping into more specific issues that we encounter. We'll maybe Vincent and I will put out a list of what we think are the top, the top issues that come in, and then you guys can all vote for which ones you guys want to tackle first, right? The top topics. I think what I'll finish it up by this is that there's the direction for the new marketing. You guys all know, and I've been emphasizing this. I'm going to emphasize it again. The direction in the new marketing is elevating the director as the co-brand, right? So there's many places where parents can get tutoring help, right? There's many more now than there ever was in the past. There's competition out there. The service that you're providing, and I think it's an important way to think it through this way. Tutoring is not the primary service you're providing. What do you think, when I say that, Craig, that might sound a little bit crazy, tutoring, what do you think is the primary service that you're providing, Craig? What do you think I'm saying about that? What is the primary
I mean, anybody can tutor, but are you going to give them ongoing service and, quality, quality people and care actually, some people just send them out and at that point they're done.
Yeah.
But we're more an ongoing, more compassionate, I would say.
Yeah. Susan, what do you think, if tutoring isn't the primary service, what's the primary service?
Being their psychiatrist.
Their psychiatrist. I don't know if we can officially prescribe medication.
We can't put that on the marketing anyway.
We can't put that on the marketing, but listen. Psychologist, yeah. The primary service that we're offering, you are the primary service that you're offering. It's the liaison. That's what's going to keep you with these families for years and years. It's because parents know that Susan, when they have a problem, they know Susan is the person that comes to mind. I call Susan because Susan understands education issues. She's going to understand this issue that I have with my child, and she's going to connect me with the right instructor, and she's going to make sure that this goes on an ongoing basis, that this is working. And if there's any deviation, she's going to be involved. Okay. So that is the service. And when you do that, you create scarcity, and you get to raise your rates, and you get more students, because there's only one Susan in Greater Vancouver, right? Susan Cumberland. There's only one Craig Rudolph in Edmonton. They have to come to you. And your word of mouth referral, as you do great work in your community, your word of mouth referral builds and builds. And when those people come in, they're already sold. So this conversation in that beginning is certainly about helping the student with the subject and all that, but it's really about building that connection, building that rapport, establishing that relationship with that customer, so that they know that you care, you're the one that's there for them. All right, so Vincent, any final words?
Yeah, one thing I wanted to mention that Greg kind of touched upon at the very, very beginning, but I wanted to emphasize is, what I did is when I get off phone, I want the client to feel like they found their need to make any more phone calls. And so one thing I make sure to do every time I talk with a new client is to make sure there's a clear next step from me. So in other words, so sometimes you have, as Susan mentioned before, the client where they're like, oh, I need to talk to my daughter to see what her schedule is, or I need to, talk to my husband or wife about this or whatever. And they'll say, I'll follow up with you. I always tell them, okay, great. I've made a note to give you a call back on Friday of whatever the date is. I haven't heard back from you then, right? And then to follow up that phone conversation with a communication log, recapping the conversation, and clearly laying out what that next step is going to be from you. So I'll always say, like you back to your schedule, I follow with you then with on a couple of days I haven't heard back, or whatever that next step is going to be. But the point is, don't let the client get off the phone without your telling them what's the next thing that you are going to do to follow up them again.
Okay, excellent point. Okay, all right, so that wraps it up. The goal and the future meetings start sharp at 9 o'clock, sharp at 9:30, and so I apologize for going over on this one. We will be archiving these, and these will be hosted in the operations, in a document in the operations tab of Opus. Thank you, Craig and Susan, for being willing to meet with Himanshu. And I know you guys are scheduling it. Himanshu, thank you very much for joining and for your contribution. Looking forward to connecting again, and we'll see you guys next week.
Okay, thanks. Bye.
You're welcome.
Bye, everyone.
Guys.